Welcome to the second Mid-Love Tutoring Festival Qualified Tutor podcast episode. God, that's a bit of a mouthful. Tonight, we will be welcoming on Harry Cobb, Helen Kenworthy and Georgina Green onto this podcast, which we have titled Running an Agency. And I think it's important that we set out nice and early that this conversation is going to be about running an agency. There are obviously so much we could talk about establishing an agency or why a private tutor could go into setting up an agency. But tonight we want to focus on that real role of being an agency or tutoring organization leader. So really we've had another incredible day of the festival. What a lovely way to bring today to an end. Just as brief introductions of each of our speakers, so you have a bit of context as to where the perspectives of tonight are going to be coming from. Helen Kenworthy is the founder of the Complete Works, an innovative tuition agency that works to tailor its teaching to the child's needs, particularly in the area of special educational needs and disabilities, and in the framework of learning through kind of creative expression. Harry Cobb is the head of tuition at Bonus Macfarlane, an agency really that is a pioneer of agency tutoring in this country, having been established nearing 20 years ago. Harry himself has been there for Bonus's kind of international expansion and currently helps run the Independent Schools Show, which is the largest such show in the UK. And our final guest this evening is Georgina Green, who is the founder of Green Tutors, a wonderful tuition agency based out of Herefordshire, which serves its students with passion, with energy and with dedication, really embodying all of the wonderful areas that make a tuition agency so impressive and such a one that has such an impact on children's lives. So we're going to learn more about our speakers this evening. That's just a brief introduction, but welcome the three of you. We're going to dive right into our first question of the evening, which is, what is your why as a tutoring business leader? Georgina, we're going to start with you on this one. What is your why?
So there's the fairly obvious idea that it's a bit of financial freedom, isn't it? To be able to deliver all the things that I want to do, to be able to explore and learn and try new things out with my business, developing a bit more and handing more of the tuition over to somebody else lets me do those things and still have the financial freedom I need in my business. It also initially was because I didn't want to keep saying no to people when they said, can you help me with XYZ, that I couldn't. Now I can find someone that can help them. And also I wanted to, my reasons for wanting to tutor were that I had a real passion for my subjects and I've seen how it's applied in my scientific career. So I just wanted to find a whole other group of people with different scientific and engineering careers to share that and make science and maths a bit more interesting for school age students.
And I think you've probably done that. So thank you, Georgina. Helen, can we move on to you next?
Absolutely. For me, it was because of my experiences as a tutor. Everything seemed to be too compartmentalized. So I wanted to create something that really made a wraparound service, whatever the individual needs, not just educational needs, but the general wraparound that a student needed. And there didn't seem to be one place that could really get to know the students, whatever age they were, and say, okay, these are all the elements, and we can make sure that all of those bits are together in one place, so that the families that we work with don't have to try and remember a million different phone numbers and etc. They know that they can come to one place and have a friendly voice at the end of the phone at the same time. And the other bit was, I'd worked in lots of different alternative provision environments, and every single one of them seemed to be going down trying to be mainstream route. And there were lots of students who were coming to these APs because of how flexible and student-centred and supportive and nurturing they were, and then suddenly they would go all mainstream and the students would be stressed and not turning up, and you're thinking, listen to them, for heaven's sake, listen to what they actually need. They're blossoming when you do that wraparound. So I thought, no, if I want to work in that environment, by the looks of it, I need to create one. So that's where the Complete Works came in.
Look at that. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Helen. Harry, can we turn to you?
Yeah, certainly. I think, when I started as a tutor, you see the transformational change you have with working with a student one-to-one and developing that confidence, which is obviously hugely impactful and very rewarding. And then having done a degree in business, I was always interested in, growing and developing a company to obviously hopefully change lives. And as I said, develop kind of lifelong learners. So that's kind of why I got into it and where I am now.
Yeah, you said two key phrases in what we do there, Harry, which is transformational tutoring and lifelong learners. And certainly those are two things that Helen and Georgina embody, and certainly values that we hold very important at QT. So thank you kind of very much for pointing those out. Now, Helen, I'm going to go back to you for this one. And really, I'd like to know, as a tutoring business leader, how there's a central problem to what we do compared to other issues that we have to kind of work with every day as a tutoring business that works with both tutors and with clients, parents and students. How do we overcome this dual problem of finding new clients and at the same time attracting new tutors or educators?
Well, for us, it's about the development of the reputation, because the more your niche is known, the more what your strength is known, the more people will naturally gravitate to you, because they know that that's the particular thing that's going to make their life easier. So we've focused quite heavily on on putting out the reputation, on developing the relationships with the families that we were already working with, and getting those responses and getting those reviews and getting those personal connections out, because people buy from people. People want to be involved with people. So the more families could be those people, it meant that the new families trusted us more. So that's how we started to spread our net. Does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Harry, do you have some thoughts on that, on this kind of this dual problem and then this kind of spreading the net, as Helen was mentioning just there?
Well, I think Helen summarizes it pretty well. It's essentially about client care, and obviously we're in the service-led business, and if you can dig deeper and nurture those relationships and really understand what parents want, and therefore what their children essentially need, and getting to know them, then ultimately you're going to create a level of trust and knowledge in order to support them right the way through their education. And unlike schools, where obviously you might go to 3 or 4, as hopefully a tutoring agency, you can see them right the way through their education. So I guess kind of a mantra for us is kind of cradle to career, but essentially that just means that we can take them along, or support them hopefully along their journey. So that's really where you build your client base from. And then from a tutor perspective, I guess once you've got a good, strong team of tutors, it's really through word of mouth referrals and their enjoyment with working with us as an agency, respecting them, giving them the training and the care that they need. And that's essentially how we're lucky to access arguably some of the best tutors in the country.
Yeah, so just picking on a point you were making just a touch earlier, how do we really work out what parents want from the tutoring? They might come to your agency and say, oh, my child needs help, and try and shove the child onto you and say you help with their education. But how do you, as the the board of the leaders of the agency, how do you really work out what parents want from your services, Harry?
Well, often they come with an objective, which is to pass the 11 plus, or to gain access into a competitive school, or obviously to kind of gain access to Oxbridge or a top Russell Group university. And for us, if it's appropriate, we will assess the student. So we do work with educational psychologists. And for us, it's understanding not only their cognitive profile, but also their personality. And then it's my skill and experience, hopefully, to essentially select the right tutor who is ultimately a mentor as well, to give them the confidence and the guidance to achieve that goal. Now, if that isn't realistic, or the expectations are not realistic from a client perspective, then again, that's obviously where we would guide the family and the tutor in order to ensure that the student develops in the way that we expect.
Yeah. So Georgina, this can be a tricky area, can't it? Matching student with tutor, as Harry has mentioned, especially as your business grows, which is something we're going to get onto in just a second. As your tutoring business grows, that job gets much harder, because you have to keep knowing your tutors and your students and your parents just as well as you did when you only had two of them, two of each. So Georgina, how do we manage this area of continuously matching the right student with the right tutor?
I think a lot of this is where, all of these points so far are quite related. Once you've established what your why is, and you're looking into growing your tutor team and finding new clients for those, all of that is done really with marketing and putting out a picture, like what your values are and what you're aiming to deliver to your customers. And everyone's gonna do that slightly differently. So the people that are going to contact me are the people that like that message, so they're all going to have the same sort of values, and they're going to, like, if I've got a particular focus on supporting anxious students or people who are potentially interested in STEM careers, then they're going to contact me because they've got an anxious child that's interested in a STEM career. So for a large part of it, it is because they like my message. But beyond that, I'll have a conversation with parents when I first speak to them about their child, and ask what's their experiences so far, what would they like to do when they leave school, what things are they finding challenging at the moment, what ways do you find to support them. And you get a really good picture of that child that 90% of the time just needs a bit more of a confidence boost, but there'll be some specific things that they need for a particular career that they're interested in, or a particular challenge that they're facing. So if it's because they're a really disruptive child and their parent struggles to get them to do any work outside of school, then they need to be matched with a tutor that's going to be disciplined with them and not take any messing around in the lessons. If they need a confidence boost, they need to be matched with a tutor that's quite soft and not particularly intimidating. So a large part of it is just a lot of the tutors that I match and hire are quite similar to me anyway. But a part of it is that you just have that element of understanding the child and specifically what they need.
Yeah, and that's really through a process that we touched on actually in the previous event with some kind of highly experienced entrepreneurs, about making sure that you don't dive in with a new client, business partner, whatever, too soon, and making sure that you understand who they are and what their values are before diving in with them. And that's just, that couldn't really be more important with the tutor-student relationship, because the worst thing that we could do is match a student who's already struggling with a tutor who's not matched with them, which then further worsens their experience of learning. So absolutely a very, very kind of key part of what agency leaders do. But Helen, I wonder if you had some insights here on Georgina touched on a point there about, sometimes when a parent approaches you with something that they believe is that their child needs help with, sometimes the objectives of the parent and the true objectives of the student might not be too aligned. Do you have conversations kind of with the student as well, outside of the conversation with the parent, to get to know the student, given that that's the one that you're going to be working with kind of more closely?
We tend to have a multi-step process. I mean, fundamentally, Harry, Georgina, and I are all saying exactly the same thing. It's about really understanding the needs of the family. It's about understanding the needs of the student. It's about understanding what the student thinks their difficulties are in comparison with what they actually end up being. So we, at the very beginning, it's always me at the moment at the very beginning that I have a huge discussion with the parent, with the carer, whoever, about what that young person is like, what the student is like, what their needs are. I gather as much information to gather as possible, as Georgina's just said, but also sort of looking into the psychology of it as well, in terms of what other elements might there be that are also impacting on what their needs are. Most of the time, Georgina is absolutely right. Most of the time, it does come down to confidence. More often than not, they simply don't believe that they can do what they actually can do. I mean, Julia talks about the quote often. If you think you can't, or if you think you can, you're probably right. And it's about the positivity, looking at it positively, looking at the how, looking at the yes, looking at the what the right route is for that student. And our steps are the first discussion, the first in-depth discussion, then a conversation with the student, as I say, to find out where they think their strengths and weaknesses are, so we can then work out where those strengths and weaknesses actually are, and then we will do a test session with them, where we're beginning to get to know them, but also we're beginning to get to know how they naturally approach their work, and then once we know at that stage that the relationship is working, because you can believe that the chemistry is going to be there, but if it isn't there, then it's not going to move forward. So once we've done that first trial session, and we know that the chemistry is there, and that there's a beginning of relaxing into what they do need, then you can start cranking up into what the learning program is going to be.
Yeah, getting into the real kind of the real content delivery of helping that child, really furthering their progress kind of rapidly, which is what we're aiming to do. Now, Harry, when we spoke about this conversation, prior to the festival, one thing that we discussed was how the ability to get to know your tutor, which is the lifeblood of your agency, are your tutors, how the ability to get to know your tutor in this day and age, in the kind of lockdown age, has become more difficult, because in-person meetings have largely been removed, and therefore understanding the personality of your tutor has got trickier. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how, given the ease with which you can hire a new tutor today, how do we continue to provide value for our clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was always told everyone could be nice for 15 minutes. So you need to spend a little bit longer than that.
Well, we're about 15 minutes into this conversation.
Yeah. And I guess, to my benefit, I've been interviewing tutors for the last 7 years. So I'm probably not far off meeting at least 500, if not 1,000 tutors. So when we went into the pandemic, to be able to interview tutors online obviously gives me quite a lot of experience and years behind me to know kind of how they operate. And so, yeah, there are losses obviously of not being able to meet people in person, whether they can turn up to the office on time, how well presented they look in person physically. But obviously it is trying to spend an hour, 2 hours with them to discuss what they're about, what their ambitions are, why they're getting into tutoring, what are their motivations, how long they want to be within the game. Are they just doing it as a side hustle while they look to write a play or be an actor? Or are they deeply intrinsically motivated about wanting to work in education, but they feel that being part of a school has too much bureaucracy and they enjoy the one-to-one element of it. Then obviously you've got the kind of lesson plan element to it. So each tutor needs to deliver a tutorial, of which we will kind of critically talk about and discuss. And it's just over that period of time, you're getting to understand them as people. You're also obviously portraying your values, what our company is about, talking about the expectations of the clients that we work with. Bonus McFarland is kind of sets itself, I guess, in the kind of high net worth individual world where students are already independently educated, but they want, you know, that extra support in order to access the best institutions. So it's important that tutors understand our philosophy, and that's essentially how we go about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna feed back a question to you, Harry, but this question I'd like to pose to the three of you, but I'm going to start with Harry. Off the back of what you've just said, have you then found that people's motivations for getting into tutoring have changed in the past year? You mentioned there you analyze why a tutor wants to get into tutoring before you take them on. Have you seen changes in the reasons why people have wanted to get into tutoring in the past year?
Well, absolutely, yeah, because, you know, the creative industries, as an example, have been dead and buried for 18 months. So a lot of the tutors that work with us 10 years have kind of flocked back and want to obviously work with us in order to fund their way through the last 18 months. Some of those have been absolutely completely inspirational teachers, and we've been very sad to lose them. So in that respect, we've been fortunate that they've been able to offer their services.
Okay, brilliant. Georgina, can I pass this over to you? Have you found that the reasons why people have approached screen tutors to become tutors has changed, or have you noticed a difference?
Just recently, yes, I would get a lot of applications previously from like people who were maybe completing a PhD and had an interest in education and wanted to have some experience of that through tutoring. Just recently, I had 100 applications in the last year, and most of them were people who were already tutors but just wanted an extra avenue to find clients because there was a massive rise in online tutoring over the last year for some reason. So it was very difficult for independent tutors to find clients. Much easier through an agency.
Okay, so as the scope of work scaled back, people resorted a little bit more to agencies, do you think?
Yeah.
As a place to find work. Yeah, no, I think that's certainly a trend that will have been seen across industries, not just in the tutoring sphere. Helen, can I call on you to give insights into kind of Barbara's question that she just asked there? Do you think that, given that many tutors work across agencies, do you think that there is is there other value other than the pay that can motivate a tutor to work for a particular agency? And please draw on your experiences as with the complete works.
I think it actually links back very much to what Georgina was saying a moment ago about the reputation and the methodology of the agency, of the organisation. I mean, we're very much SEN and vulnerable students, so those are the families that gravitate to us, and because it's very much a mentor and coach and counsellor and supporter. A lot of the tutors who well, actually a lot of tutors who come to us actually are recommended, so it's word of mouth from other tutors, but lots of people want to come because they want to be working within that environment with the students. So it's sort of the focus on ongoing learning, but more watching and helping the learner to develop and to build that confidence and for the light to go back on in their eyes. A lot of our students have been out of education because they haven't been happy in education. So a lot of, a lot of tutors have chosen to come because they're choosing to be in that environment, and it's fairly difficult to really get that message across in your personal profile when you're registered with, let's say, Tutor Hunt or First Tutors or any of the other sort of myriad of effectively tutor dating agencies, where you're trying to describe how you work and how you connect with your students. But it's very difficult to paint that three-dimensional, vibrant picture when all you've got is some words in front of you. So if you go to an organisation, to an agency that's known for that, then you know you're going to be jumping right into exactly the field that you want to be involved with.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really kind of one of the safety nets of working for an agency, isn't it? Is understanding the kind of the values that agency has and the support network it has, and going alone as a private tutor. You're kind of forging that yourself, aren't you? So yeah. you're almost writing the rules as you go along, which for some is the absolute, that's the gold dust, that's what drives them on, and for others that's what terrifies them. So I think it's a huge compliment to this industry that there are so many of both. Now that was what we've just been saying there is a little bit about what the purposes of a tutoring agency can serve. And now I'd like to turn a little bit towards your roles in your companies and how those have changed, how those have solidified in certain areas, and then your thoughts on kind of how those roles will look as your company grows. So I'd like to start with, what have you found, Harry? I'm going to start with you here, if that's okay. What are some of the biggest obstacles that you've found in transitioning from a smaller team to a larger business with many tutors? When you first joined Bonus McFarlane, there were clearly far fewer tutors. So what have you seen as some of the lessons you've learned along the way in moving from a smaller team to a bigger team of tutors?
Well, I guess obviously the bigger team you have, arguably the kind of less control you might have over your team. So it's just making sure that you're delivering a message to all of the tutors, and the standard that you keep is as strong as when you had 2 clients to when you have 200 clients. So ultimately that's a challenge when you grow from 60 tutors to 600. And I guess we've been fortunate in that technology has improved significantly over time. So the fact that you can have webinars, you can communicate with tutors much more easily through WhatsApp, or through smartphones, they can ultimately turn up to people's houses on time rather than relying on the A to Z. Has definitely helped in that respect.
And have you found that a bit of a plug here, but have you found that software such as kind of Tutor Cruncher has been able to help with that transition?
Sponsored by Tutor Cruncher, yeah, absolutely. Tutor Cruncher, hopefully they'll listen to us at some point, has definitely been revolutionary for our business, just in the sense of clearly being able to communicate with tutors, for tutors who understand the system. Many agencies use the platform, so it's very intuitive. It's fantastic, obviously, for invoicing, and it just allows myself to spend more time ultimately speaking to families and having to worry less about the administrative side about it.
Yeah, exactly. Doing those things that A, we love doing, and B, that we as humans are best at, which is not going through 600 tutors reports at the end of each month and 600 clients billing invoices. It's developing relationships. It's another topic that we were discussing in the event prior to this, about how although AI and tech will come and sweep education off its feet, humans will never be lost in that, and will in fact only be reinforced in their roles. Georgina, can I turn that question that I originally asked towards you about some of the biggest obstacles you found in growing your team?
Yeah, so I mean, mine's a lot smaller. It's a long way from 600 tutors, so I still get a lot of the benefits with the small company, but I have built it with lots of one-on-one time with those tutors and getting to know them and learning about the things that they're passionate about, and having social events and sending gifts and having one-on-one training and things like that with them. But it gets, as the bigger it gets, the harder it is to do things like that, and I spend less time with them individually, and they kind of, I feel like I leave them to themselves a bit too much, which is why actually I was quite grateful to be able to direct them all through qualified tutor training, because I feel like they've had that time that they missed with me. You kind of have to have a point where you just let go and accept the fact that they are fine by themselves and that they have the opportunity to ask for help when they want it. Because that is why they were hired, because I feel like they can do the job. They don't need to be having lots of hand holding, but it's hard because it was started as just me tutoring one-to-one everybody that was a customer. The business literally has my name in it and I'm handing it over to somebody else, so there is an element of just letting go and accepting that it's going to be okay.
Go into that more, Georgina. How do you manage to, how did you get through that? That's clearly something that was difficult.
Yeah, it was hard, and I mean I ended up having to didn't really view it as like a leadership role. I was growing my team and they were all working with me doing the same thing, and then at some point I realized this isn't how it works. You are the leader of this. You are supposed to be leading it. You're not supposed to be doing it and then telling them how to do it and then doing it for them. You have to accept that leadership role, which means stepping back from the doing, and making sure that things are running, and this is just the next step in the business, and you know it's just going to be a bit different. It's hard to let go, but if I'm micromanaging and trying to get involved in everything that's happening, I'm not allowing them to do it properly, and I feel like they won't actually give as much to things as if they're just left to do it their own way.
And if you micromanage at every stage the student in a tutoring session, then they'll never take those next steps themselves, will they? If every step of the way you're telling them how to do it and what to do, and you know, getting your fingers in all of those pies, then you're not going to allow those people to flourish. So that's modeling effective practice in what you're doing, Georgina. Absolutely. Now, Linda has just asked a really pertinent question, actually, that I'm going to pose to Helen first. We've all been tutoring online, and for many that's there to stay because it works so much better. And some of us, including Lucy, who's in the audience tonight, have been tutoring online much before the pandemic hit. But Linda's asking, do you see online tuition still serving kind of a big part of your company, even though we could move back to face-to-face? Do you find that the lessons we've learned from online tutoring will still continue to play a big part?
Absolutely, definitely, yes. I mean, despite all the negatives of the last year and a half and how terrible the lockdowns have been and all the rest of it, actually, there have been some wonderful positives, which includes the technology that's come online, the tools that have suddenly become available, the training in the tools, so that you can see how things marry up and how creative you can be and how encouraging you can be. And students who haven't been able to leave their own bedrooms for ages actually can engage and be encouraged through a screen in their own room. So there are so many positives from online. Plus, as Lucy says all the time, we've got a global reach now. So definitely, we will carry on using all the online resources, all the online provision for the foreseeable. And where face-to-face and one-to-one and whatever it is the right way forward for the group or for whoever the learners are, then fine, that's what we'll come back to. But there are just such massive positives to the online. It would be insane to throw it out the window.
No, well, we don't plan on doing that. So rest assured. Harry, do your experiences match up with that?
Absolutely, I'd echo exactly what Helen said. I think in addition to that, you know, sometimes in the UK, families were very reluctant to have online tutors come into their home, particularly in London, because obviously you can access great quality of teachers into your home. But actually, you know, having someone in your house every week can become quite invasive, and to have the ability to have someone come in online makes life a lot easier, particularly if they're slightly older students and they need some corrections looking over, or they've just had an essay back and they want it scanned over before they go into class the next day. It's got huge benefits. And on top of that, we work with a huge international community, many of whom who are trying to access top academic institutions within the UK. And while we still send lots of tutors overseas and abroad, there's a huge cost implication to that. And so to be able to kind of parachute UK-based tutors into the living room of someone living in India or China for half the cost, or at an hourly cost without having to worry about flights and visas, etc., is incredible.
And really, one would imagine will be the norm for kind of many years to come, or at least the norm for certain tutors, if not, you know, across the board.
Yeah, and sorry, just to add to that, you know, for tutors themselves, there used to be obviously kind of a sweet spot between 4 or half 3 and 7 when school was finished, and now you're opened up to a whole global society, and tutors ultimately can start at kind of 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, work with families in Hong Kong, move through to China, go through to India, go through to Russia, go through to Turkey. They might want to meet someone face to face in the UK, and then if they've got clients in America, you know, their day is quadrupled in terms of hours of work.
Are you advocating for tutors to work from 7 a.m. every single day?
You'd be surprised.
No, absolutely. It was something that I learned myself as a tutor when the pandemic first hit, was how accessible those other tutoring markets were. Not that I'd ever considered kind of flying over beforehand, but no, thank you very much for that, Harry, and for bringing out that point, which, you know, people may have heard around about, but you know, if that's the first time that you've really considered that angle, then that's a very kind of eye-opening moment to reach. Now we're coming to the end, really, of this conversation, as with yesterday evening's Late Night Live. It is approaching 9:20 to 10 p.m. in the evening. So for those of you joining from the US, then it's probably you're just getting into your day. You might just be just after lunch. But I'd like to draw this conversation really to a close by asking the three of you in turn, just to briefly summarize, what are the next steps for your businesses? We've talked a little bit about, well, sorry, you've talked about your experiences drawing on your roles in your business, but I think it would be a very useful step to take here to learn really what the next steps are for your businesses and what we can take as tutoring businesses, tutoring business owners, and tutors ourselves. So Helen, I'm going to start with you. What's coming up next for the Complete Works?
Okay, so for us, thinking about what we were just saying about online and tools, etc., and we are very aware of the fact that lots of our students have insomnia, etc., where they want somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. So our next step is to we're in the process of creating a whole range of resources that are available online whenever they need it, with a personal kick to it. So they feel that they've got us there and they can ask us whatever they need, but it's there whenever they need it.
Wonderful. Cannot wait to see the development of that. I think that sounds like a really personalized touch, using, you know, enhancing this digitalization that we have. Georgina.
So I'm basically practicing further what I was saying earlier, that I need to take hands off, and what I was saying yesterday, that I need to take holidays. So I'm looking at putting in more automation so that essentially I'm needed less. Ultimate goal being I'm not needed at all, but I think I would still love to be able to meet students as much as possible. That way I can focus on adding extra, because I want to add, now that people are actually using their computers for tuition and comfortable with that, just add more online resources and things that people can dip into when they need to, and that all of the tutors can use when they need to.
Absolutely. So really kind of enhancing Green Tutors, your role in Green Tutors, by not being involved in the kind of operational level, which is so important for an entrepreneur to think about. Julia taught me that one. So Harry, you have the pleasure of the final words here. What are the next steps for Bonus Macfarlane?
I think for us, for a long time, the most competitive schools have really been focusing too much on academic assessment. And fortunately, it is shifting a little bit more to actually understanding the pupil, and as a consequence, investing more times in the interview and doing kind of day assessments to see how they interact with their peer groups. So we're kind of taking that onus and we're setting up summer camps to develop students' confidence and looking more into developing lifelong passions and skills, investing more in kind of their well-being and their mental health, alongside obviously the academic support that they need, but running them as parallel. So gearing up tutors to focus as much on the mentoring as the kind of academic support that families often come to us at the beginning for.
What a wonderful next step then for Bonus is turning those academic tutors into kind of all-round educational kind of mentors. I think that's a really important step. Thank you, the three of you, for giving your time to share your experiences there. I think that's been an incredibly helpful conversation for me, and I hope for the quite extraordinary 24 attendees that we have on this event. For our podcast listeners in the weeks and months and years to come, you won't know that there was actually a great audience here with us, or you won't at least have been able to see them, but we have been lucky enough to. And I think that's a real testament to both what you three have been saying and of the excess of the festival in the 2 days so far. So thank you to Georgina, thank you to Helen, thank you to Harry, thank you to Dan Wardle, to Helen, who've been working on tech this evening, to Lucy, to Natalia, to Elizabeth, to Miguel, to Ellen, to Danielle, to Linda for your questions, to Ruthie as well, and to those of us who have joined. Tomorrow is our big teaching and learning day. You can find out more about Georgina, Helen and Harry in the link that I have just put into the chat. And for those of our podcast listeners, this was Tuesday at the Love Tutoring Festival. This was the business of tutoring, and we have 3 days to go. So thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. £20. Bye.